Hey there, folks. I am making this video for those of you who don't really have much ZBrush experience or maybe don't have any ZBrush experience. Uh, I want to remind you that these videos are only for my students. This is Peter again speaking, and this is not to be distributed. Just for you guys, you can feel free to keep it. Again, I don't want to see this online or anywhere else. It's just for you. So in this lesson, I want to cover just some basic interface for ZBrush. Now, I'm using ZBrush 4R6. 4R7 did just come out, but we don't really have that yet, so 4R6 is what we're going to use. Now, you want to make sure you're using a Wacom tablet. ZBrush is honestly close to useless without it. You really don't have any of the ability to sculpt with any precision without one. Uh, let's talk about the interface here really quick. So this is usually what you're going to be presented with. You're just going to have this bar open over here. You're going to have this canvas back here. This is kind of the default interface. So this open area over here is called the light box. It's kind of like a browser bridge. You can pull different brushes here, different textures. For example, I keep a lot of materials, so all the materials that I have are stored over here. You just open that up or close it right here through Lightbox. Now, ZBrush works a little bit different than most other 3D softwares. In fact, it's not really a traditional 3D software at all. What we're actually looking at here is not a 3D space, but it's actually a canvas. Now, we can move this canvas around using these buttons over here. This allows us to scroll the canvas, zoom in on the canvas. Keep in mind, this is not like zooming in on a model. This is more like zooming in on a Photoshop canvas. We can click this to go to the actual view. This one over here is just to see it at half res with anti-aliasing. There we go. Now, by default, when you start dragging around in ZBrush, you're just going to get this weird 2.5D painting. It's a very cool feature. You can actually go over here and choose brushes. Maybe I want to use this snake hook brush and pull things around. I could also grab something like my fiber brush and paint fibers here. I could change what materials I'm working with. So by default, kind of when you open it, it's really just a 2.5D painting application. And it's really powerful. It's a lot of fun to play with, but that's not really the intention that we have for it. We're going to be using it as a sculpting application. So to clear this out, I'm going to hit Control-N. That's going to give me a new document, a new canvas. Now, the way I'm going to prefer to work, and this is the way we're usually going to be working, is by loading a piece of geometry. Now, we can do that one of two ways. If you already have a ZBrush, basically ZTL, sorry, saved out, you can just go here to Load Tool and load that up. If you're importing an OBJ that maybe you exported out of Maya, you can use the Import button over here. Or you can actually also make use of pre-built geometry in ZBrush. To do that, I can click over here. This is my tool palette, and maybe I can choose a cube. All your most recently used tools are going to appear over here. Everything in ZBrush that you load into this panel, which are going to be models primarily, but also some types of brushes, they're referred to as tools. Now, to add a tool to my canvas, I just have to drag. Once I've drug it in order to make this an active 3D object that I can work with, I have to be sure to come up here and hit Edit. Shortcut is T. I can now move this around. Now, I'm rotating this just by using my Wacom tablet and clicking in the empty space, and you can see it will rotate around. I can pan it by holding Alt and then click and drag. I can also zoom by beginning to pan, which is Alt and drag. And while I'm still dragging without lifting my pen, I'm going to let go of Alt, and that allows me to zoom. If you have another a pen with an extra mouse button, you can actually configure that to zoom for you. There's also multiple shortcut keys you can set if you don't like this style of zooming, but you'll find you get used to it really, really quickly. Now, you'll notice that by default, we're not getting any perspective here. That's because the ZBrush view normally is orthographic. By the way, you can see me snapping here. What I do is I rotate, and while I'm rotating, if I tap and hold Shift, it'll actually snap to the nearest view. So to go ahead and enable perspective, you can see some of these buttons have now activated. I can click over here. You can see now I have some perspective. So I'll go ahead and scale out there. Now keep in mind, I'm not moving my camera right now. I am not rotating my camera right now. The way Zbrush sees this is I'm actually rotating these pixels. These are kind of their proprietary format. I'm rotating the pixels around. I'm scaling the pixels up and down. Just something to remember. It's not a hugely important thing if you think of this as your camera, but just know the way Zbrush thinks. If I want to orient myself a little better, I can go ahead and turn on a floor, which you can see is very helpful because with this cube, I didn't realize I was on my side. Now, this is not an actual grid or ground plane. This is just a plane that gets parented to the bottom of your object to give you a sense of orientation. You can actually change where it appears. If you take a look over here, there's these little X, Y, and Z buttons you can turn on by clicking on them, and then you can get those grids as well. Go ahead and keep just the Y grid there, and honestly, I don't really need it right now. Now, at the moment, local transformations are on, meaning that let's say I sculpt over here. I didn't really do anything. It doesn't let me sculpt right now. But notice I'm rotating around that corner. If I click here, again, it'll give me that error, but I'm now rotating around that corner. If I turn off local rotations, I'm always rotating around the center of the axis, not over the center of where I'm working. So that's an important button. Left and right symmetry, or excuse me, local symmetry, we'll discuss a little bit later. Don't really need that right now. Now, by default, we're in this weird kind of tumbly view. You'll probably learn to love this. I know I'm a huge fan of it. But if you work in Maya, it might seem a little bit strange. You might be more familiar with this typical Y rotation. Turn on my floor there and actually orient myself properly. There we go. I'll turn on the Y orientation. And you can see I can no longer tumble on the Z axis. A bit more like Maya, although it gets very difficult to get into tight places to sculpt this way. I prefer the kind of XYZ rotations. Now, you also have some shortcuts here. You can tap this for frame. You notice you can also hit F to frame. So let's say you accidentally lose your object. Let me lose it there. Tap F and it'll come back, same as frame. You can also move, scale, and rotate through here. If you need to, you could also turn on your polyframe to see. There you go. We also have transparency, which won't work right now because transparency in Zbrush only works if you have more than one object. And if I also have more than one object, I can make use of the cello and exposed options. Because I don't right now, I'm not really going to worry about them. So that's kind of your basic interface, canvas over here. Up here at the top, we're going to go over these when we start sculpting, but this is where my draw mode, move mode, where I can change how I'm painting, the intensity of my sculpting, my brush sizes. Don't worry about this quick sketch up here. That's not really something we're going to be working with. On the right over here, once we get into sculpting, this is where we can set alphas, textures, change our brush types. You can see there's obviously a lot of them. Colors over here, materials there. On the right over here, this is basically an open area. At the moment, the tool panel is in here, but if I tap this little clock, it'll go away. It's basically this tool panel right here. These are all capable of sitting anywhere in our interface just by dragging them over. If I want that tool panel back, oops, go ahead and click that and it'll go back. As a matter of fact, if you click over here on this divider, I actually can do the same over here. Maybe I want to have my materials over there. They were already there, but now I have them again. I can grab my lights and drag those over too. And then I can always close those off whenever I don't want to see them. I can also minimize tool by clicking on it over here, and then maybe also add my transform palette. Now I have both of them, and it's easy access. Just like over there, I can close it off at any time by tapping over here. Now you'll notice that my canvas over here does not really extend all the way. It's using a default size. If I want to go ahead and increase that, I need to go here to Document, and I'm going to go ahead and just hit New Document. By default, it's going to use the maximum size. Now, it looks like my cube is gone, but in reality, my tool is still active. If I actually click and drag over here and hit Edit, you can see that it comes right back. Now, I know to you, you may not be able to see the difference, whether this is a new cube or the same cube we had before, but later on you'll see even if we had been sculpting on a model, all of our changes would still be here. So there's a lot of options in ZBrush. There's obviously tons in all these menus, but there's no need to go ahead and learn them all right away. You're basically going to use them as you need them. So I'm going to go ahead and end this first lesson here. Again, this was just very, very basic interface. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can at least begin sculpting and some of the basic workflows when it comes to sculpting inside of ZBrush.